Quick play spell cards are some of the most useful spell cards in the game that can quickly alter the state of the game through their effects. So let's go over some of the best quick play spell cards of the pre-synchro era. Starting off our list at number 10, we have Offerings to the Doom. For the cost of skipping your next draw phase, you can target and destroy one face-up monster on the field. Now, the effect of Offerings to the Doom is pretty simple and cuts right to the chase. The obvious issue with Offerings is that there's the consequence of skipping your next draw phase, which is a pretty terrible downside. Regardless, the strength of a single target removal in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Can find some good usage here and there, especially since Offerings to the Doom is a quick play spell, which is why it's seen usage. You can disrupt your opponent's plays, or use it on your turn to push for advantage in the game state. But at the end of the day, the fact that Offerings is a quick play spell card won't save it against its competition, as there are better versions of Offering to the Doom which provide the same effect at less of a cost. There's the Limited Lightning Vortex, which has the effect to discard one card and destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls. And of course, Raigeki, which just destroys all monsters your opponent controls. However, in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Raigeki is banned. But the main monster removal card is typically Smashing Ground or Hammer Shot, which destroy the monster with the highest defense or attack on the field. And even then, it's rarely used because Battle Trap sees significantly more play in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! To be used as monster removal, which is why it's only at number 10 on this list. And at number 9, we have Reload. This spell card has the effect of adding all cards in your hand back to your deck, shuffling it, and drawing the same number of cards that were in your hand originally. So as per the name of the card, reload in your hand. Reload has seen rare usage given its unique effect. Even in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Few decks can make good use out of Reload, as not only are you going negative in card advantage, but you can't choose which cards to keep, unlike some other cards with similar effects like Magical Mallet, which lets you choose which cards to shuffle back. However, there are some exceptions that make use of Reload, and they all share the same overall theme, that being FTKs. Reload is mainly seen as a card that helps mulligan your hand. Decks that must run more than 40 cards like to use Reload as an option to help cycle through their cards. Common examples are in either Library FTK or Blast in the Ruins FTK. Library FTK uses a combination of Archfiend's Oath and Convulsion of Nature to lower your life points down to 500 to then win with Reversal Quiz, which swaps your life points with your opponents, and Black Pendant, which deals 500 damage to your opponent when it leaves the field. As Convulsion of Nature is a unique continuous spell card that forces you to play with your deck face up, ensuring your guess for Archfiend's Oath or Reversal Quiz are always correct. On the other hand, the Blasting the Ruins FTK is based on the trap card Blasting the Ruins, which has the effect of dealing 3000 damage to your opponent if there are 30 or more cards in your graveyard. So the FTK is all about dumping as many cards from your hand and deck to the grave as possible in one turn to blast away your opponent, coupled with cards like Monster Gate to send various spells and traps to the deck to the grave, and Cyberjar or Toon Table of Contents to add more cards to your hand to just discard them at the end of turn. Blasting the Ruins really showcases why Reload is used, as the deck normally runs a lot more than the standard 40 card deck to ensure you can always deal more than 8000 damage with 3 copies of Blasting the Ruins. With that many cards, Reload becomes a valuable mulligan if bricks are drawn, as you can get another chance to dump more cards into the graveyard. Outside of the few cases, in reality, Reload isn't that good, because you don't have the choice and have to reload your entire hand, and you're more than likely giving up more useful cards than not. Which is why, once Magical Mallet got released, it got a lot more use as it allowed you to pick and choose what you wanted to shuffle back. And at number 8 is Kaiba's go-to input, Enemy Controller. This quick play spell has 2 effects that you can choose from. The first option is that you can change one face-up monster your opponent controls and change its battle position. The other, and more popular effect, is that you can tribute one monster and then target a face-up monster your opponent controls and then take control of it for a turn. Featured as one of the many tools in Kaiba's arsenal, Enemy Controller is a great tool to stop your opponent, either by changing their battle position to negate an attack or to take control of one of your opponent's monsters. Although the changing a battle position effect will only buy you one turn, it can definitely save you in the right circumstances and buy you enough time to turn things around. On the other hand, there's the switching of the control effect, which has a lot more popularity. Although it's only until the end phase, you can use that monster against them, or even use it for your own plays by tributing it for an effect or bringing out another monster. Effects that steal monsters are game-changing to say the least, which is why cards like Change of Heart and Mind Control are so popular. The fact that Enemy Controller lets you steal your opponent's monsters with no downsides or limits, unlike most control switching cards, is insanely strong. You can easily get rid of your opponent's boss monster and just swing for game with a clear field, or even just a problematic monster by bringing it to your side, and either tributing it or just crash into another monster that your opponent controls. Due to the quick play nature of enemy controller, it can be activated during your opponent's turn or your turn, giving it flexibility for either effect. You can chain it in response to attack or effect, allowing you to disrupt your opponent's plans, not to mention that there's some cool combo potential with cards like Scapegoat, which can make a great tribute fodder for the effect. Despite the strong effect of enemy controller, the fact that you have to tribute a monster to steal control is a big deterrent for its usage. Tributing your own monsters and using the spell can put a dent in your card advantage, so it's typically either used to close out games. And for that, it's been used as a side deck option consistently rather than a main deck staple, and has even been up in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! With it having seen usage in 2023 and Sprite Purely decks in the YCS Germany. Next up is a simple but effective quick play spell card, Rush Recklessly at number 7. This card has the deceivingly simple effect to boost your monster's attack by 700 attack points. Despite how simple and straightforward the effect of Rush Recklessly is, it's a powerful effect for classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Due to the fact that it's a quick play spell and it's a sizable boost to attack points. Most equipped spells of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't give that strong bonuses to attack points, and even the most used ones for attack bonuses, Axe of Despair, gives 1000 attack. So realistically, Rush Recklessly is pretty great for a quick play spell. And that's the main appeal of why Rush Recklessly is such a good card in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! That rather than it being an equipped card that just provides a long-term attack boost, which is vulnerable to spell and trap destruction as well as you committing more resources into one monster. On the other hand, with Rush Recklessly, it's an expendable one-time 700 attack boost, which is more than enough in most cases that you don't need to commit to one monster to have. Rush Recklessly for its time was the largest boost that a monster could receive from a quick play or trap card without a certain condition or cost being filled, so it was great for just beating over certain monsters, defending against certain attacks, or proccing certain battle-related effects like Air Knight Parshath, which had a low 1900 attacks for a level 5 monster, but if it inflicted battle damage, it allowed you to draw an extra card. Or Hino Kagu Suchi, which would force your opponent to discard their entire hand before the next draw phase if it dealt battle damage to your opponent. The versatility that Rush Recklessly has is why it's at number 7 on our list, and how it can be used as essentially a better equipped spell than most equipped spells of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Next up is Limiter Removal. This quick play spell doubles the attack of all face-up machine type monsters you control until the end of the turn. However, as a cost, at the end phase of the turn, you destroy those monsters. From just reading its effect alone, you can understand the potential for Limiter Removal. Doubling the attack of monsters can swing games in a mere instant, allowing you to either beat over your opponent's monsters, swing for big damage, or even game. Although, most would remember seeing Limiter Removal used countless times in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime by various types of machine monster users like Cyrus, Chaz, Dr. Crowler, or Zane. The card was actually first debuted in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Show by Duke Devlin in his duel against Joey. Although machine types in GOAT format aren't the most popular, there are some amazing targets that utilize the potential of Limiter Removal. A popular usage is in tandem with Joey's star monster pre-Red Eyes, Jinzo. This level 7 monster has 2400 attack points and has the effect to nullify trap cards and their effects. This combination essentially prevents your opponent from using battle traps while you attack with your now 4800 attack Jinzo. Battle traps are much more common in GOAT format, with staples like Sakuretsu Armor and Mirror Force being ever-present threats. In a similar vein, the Ancient Gear monsters make great use of Limiter Removal. Their high stat lines and their effects to protect themselves from both spells and traps during the battle phase make them great targets for Limiter Removal. But the most popular usage of Limiter Removal was the Cyber Dragon archetype, which were all machine type monsters that could easily summon themselves, which not only were a great tool for outright damage, but also the machine fusion monsters who were cheat out of the extra deck with Metamorphosis or Cyberstein, and then dealt massive damage with copies of Limiter Removal. What's neat about Limiter Removal is that it stacks with itself, which led to the spell card being an infamously good OTK tool and got Limiter Removal on the ban list for a long time, even with its quote-unquote downside of destroying your monster. But at the end of the day, if you're wiping your opponent's life points, then who cares if your monster gets destroyed? Although the downside of Limiter Removal is overclocking your monsters to a point where they get destroyed during the end phase. So if you don't push for game or are ahead enough to leave your field without monsters, be wary of Limiter Removal. And at number 5, we have the quick play spell card, My Body as a Shield. For a cost of 1500 life points, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or monster effect that would destroy a monster on the field, you can negate the activation and destroy that card. So in other words, a poor man's Solemn Judgment. But realistically, it's not that far off from Solemn Judgment. My Body as a Shield is only a few steps behind Solemn with a lot less of a life point cost. Although it doesn't prevent the activation like Solemn, negating one of the most common effects of classic Yu-Gi-Oh!, that being destruction, can decide games. Not to mention, rather than paying half your life points, you're only losing 1500, which in the long run is a lot better. Not to mention that it's a quick play spell, and like all the other cards on this list, the value of the card only rises when it's of that card type. That it can be set like a trap card or be used on your turn like a spell card, which served as the only way to protect your monsters from the many trap cards that flooded classic Yu-Gi-Oh, like Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, and Sakuretsu Armor, that punished players going second. So the fact that My Body as a Shield was a quick play spell card allowed it to function as protection at all times, which actually surpassed Solemn Judgment in that regard, as you needed to set Solemn before making use of its effect. Even after a decade after its release in 2002, My Body as a Shield saw a massive resurgence in 2007 Zoo format to counter the rampant destruction effects that were everywhere. In June of that year, the card peaked at 160 decks at topped events that used at least one copy of My Body as a Shield, which was more than all years past combined. And at number 4, we have Emergency Provisions. This quick play spell card has the effect of sending any number of spell and trap cards you control to the graveyard and gaining 1000 life points for each card sent. What's strong about Emergency Provisions is the fact that your spells and traps don't need to be face up, so you can send any spell or trap card of your choice to the graveyard to profit from the effect. Emergency Provisions was on the limited list due to its interaction with Good Goblin Housekeeping, which is a trap card that lets you draw a card equal to the amount of copies of Good Goblin Housekeeping that are in your graveyard plus 1, and then place a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. So what you could do is chain Emergency Provisions to Good Goblin Housekeeping to draw an extra card with Goblin's effect. Additionally, there's synergy with the now thankfully forever banned Mirage of Nightmare, which is a continuous spell that once per turn, during your opponent's standby phase, you draw cards until you have 4 cards in your hand. Then during your next standby phase, randomly discard the same number of cards you drew, and will always be an insanely abusable effect. But in combination with Emergency Provisions, you can abuse the effect of Mirage of Nightmare to continuously dump spells and traps to constantly draw on each standby phase. Whether they are being targeted for spell and trap destruction from your opponent, whether you want to get rid of one of your continuous spells or trap cards to reset your back row, or if you just want to outlast your opponent with more life points. Emergency Provisions is a staple in Destiny board decks, as the card helps cycle through the many spells and traps the deck runs to compete its complicated win condition of collecting and activating 4 different spells and 1 trap card to instantly win the duel. Emergency Provisions provides a strong tool to get rid of unwanted cards, as well as gain life to prolong the game as much as possible to collect each piece. The strength of Emergency Provisions in Classic Yu-Gi-Oh! It's why it's on the limited list at 2 copies. And at number 3, we have the adorable Scapegoat. This quick play spell card special summons 4 sheep tokens in defense position. Each token is a level 1 beast with 0 attack and defense. The only downside, other than filling up almost all your monster zones, is that you can't summon other monsters the turn you activate Scapegoat. However, you can still set. Classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Is slow. There aren't too many special summons or ways to flood monsters onto your field. And so with Scapegoat summoning 4 tokens that are already in defense position, Scapegoat is an amazing defensive tool that can be used at a moment's notice to stall out your opponent's monsters from hitting your life points directly for up to 4 attacks. However, just like most token summoning cards, there are certain restrictions on what you can and can't do with the tokens. The 4 extendable tokens can't be used for tribute summoning, which is pretty popular in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! However, that's the only restriction outside of locking out a summoning for the turn, which is why Scapegoat is almost always paired with Metamorphosis and Thousand Eyes Restrict. Metamorphosis is a now banned spell card which lets you tribute 1 monster to special summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck with the same level as the tributed monster. So, by attributing one of your Scapegoats, you can bring out one of the strongest fusion monsters in classic Yu-Gi-Oh!, Thousand Eyes Restrict. This level 1 monster has 3 effects, which are all incredibly strong for the format. The first is that monsters can't attack nor change their battle positions. The second is that once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and equip it to Thousand Eyes. Then the Thousand Eyes would gain attack and defense equal to the equipped monster. And last, for some added protection, if somehow your opponent managed to bypass the first effect of Thousand Eyes and it was destroyed by battle, you can destroy the equipped card instead. There's even a normal spell card version of Scapegoat called Stray Lamps, which special summons 2 tokens in defense position that are level 1 and have no attack and defense. Stray Lamps sees basically no usage, while Scapegoat is a staple in a good amount of control decks. This is mainly because of the aforementioned fact that Scapegoat is a quick play spell that can be used on your opponent's turn, and of course the fact that you get 2 more tokens with Scapegoat. And at number 2, we have arguably the most iconic quick play spell card, or even spell card of all of classic Yu-Gi-Oh!, Mystical Space Typhoon. This spell card simply destroys 1 spell or trap card on the field. This deceptively simple effect in Mystical Space Typhoon has allowed it to be a staple in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! and subsequently has gotten Mystical Space Typhoon on the limited list in GOAT format. Although in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Spell and trap card destruction is common, in Classic it's a much rarer sight. There are few cards that have no downsides to destroying spells or traps, and those that have are also either limited or banned. These culprits alongside Mystical Space Typhoon are Heavy Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster. Heavy Storm has the effect to just wipe all spells and traps on the field. Yes, both you and your opponents, and is the closest in relation to Mystical Space Typhoon as it's also limited in one copy. Then of course there's Harpy's Feather Duster, which specifically wipes all your opponent's spells and traps, but that's banned in earlier formats of the game. But again, both of these common tools are either limited or banned. Another, and the main other contender for spell and trap removal outside of Heavy Storm Mystical Space Typhoon is Dust Tornado, the trap variant which not only destroys a spell or trap card your opponent controls, but also allows you to set a spell or trap from your hand. But due to the trap card nature of Dust Tornado, it's rarely used. And that's why Mystical Space Typhoon is so strong. It's quick to use, has no downsides, and is splashable in every deck and is almost guaranteed to find good usage. The only real caveat to Mystical Space Typhoon is that it's limited at one copy, unlike our next card. Lastly, at number 1 on our list, we have the best classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Quick Play spell in Book of Moon. Although it's rarely seen nowadays, Book of Moon has been and continues to be a staple in Classic. Its effect is that you can target one face-up monster in the field and change it to face-down defense position. Despite its simple effect, Book of Moon has some of the best utility in the game, both offensively and defensively, which is why it was limited for a long time, and only once Power Creep took over, Book of Moon was taken off the limited list. Regardless, it was ran even if it was limited due to how strong and versatile it was back in the day. Offensively, and the most apparent of its uses, is to change your opponent's monster from attack position to face-down defense position, negating its effects if it has a continuous effect, and removing any equip cards or protection it might have. Additionally, in most cases, a monster's defense is lower than its attack, so beating over it becomes significantly easier. It's also worth discussing Book of Moon's usage with flip monsters, as it truly seems like Book of Moon was made for them, allowing a flip monster to activate their effect once more. This has been used and abused with cards like Cyberjar, which can destroy all monsters on field. Then both players reveal the top 5 cards of their deck and special summon level 4 lower monsters amongst them in face-up attack position or face-down defense position. The remaining cards are added to their hands. Or with Pac-Man strategy, which relies on the many desert-themed flip monsters like Swarm of Scarabs, Swarm of Locusts, and Deslacunda to ruin your opponent's plays and starve them of resources. Defensively, the main use of Book of Moon can allow your monsters to dodge the countless effects of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! That focus face-up cards to proc their effects, like Enemy Controller, which can only target face-up monsters. Although there is also usage in changing either the attacking monster or the monster being attacked to prevent a monster's destruction. Book of Moon is a part of a small group of spell cards that all share the Book of Blank. There's Book of Life, which is a popular card in zombie decks. There's Book of Taiyu, which is the opposite effect of Book of Moon, to flip a face-down monster face-up. Book of Eclipse, which changes all monsters to face-down defense position, then all your opponent's monsters get flipped back face-up. Then Book of Lunar Eclipse, which can change 2 monsters to face-down defense position at the cost of discarding a card. And of course, there's Book of Moon, which by far is the best out of the lot for its versatility, lack of cost to use, and how any deck can make use of the card, which is why it's at number 1 on our list.